Hello and welcome to another episode of Bringing the Thunder. We previously had the same guest, not I was going to say similar guest, it's the same guest, and we then talked about GQI. That was really interesting, I really loved that, and this is kind of building a little on top of that, but it's a separate thing, right?
It's a separate thing, but indeed they fit together.
Okay, so today we are going to be talking about GQI again, but more specifically, I think you mentioned operators just before we started.
Indeed.
So first, for the people who are joining for the first time, who are you and what do you do in Skyline?
Yes, my name is Wart. I am a DevOps engineer at Skyline.
All right.
And I work in the data exploration product domain. So our domain is responsible for providing user with products to visualize, consume, explore the data.
Dashboards, low-code apps, I've seen those, and I've seen ad hoc data sources.
Yes, indeed. So,
and you've got something awesome prepared for us today again.
Indeed.
So dazzle me and dazzle the audience.
Yeah.
What can you show us?
So today we will look at custom operators, which is basically another way of extending GQI. So quickly, GQI is a data engine that lets users fetch, query data generically, and it lets them create or meaningful insights for their data. So through GQI data sources and operators, we can really create these interesting metrics, interesting insights.
Right. Collect data and process them and kind of
and
sort of operators on them, I suppose. Yeah?
Yes, exactly. That's also what it's called, or we have a dashboard called like this. So indeed, if you want to talk with GQI, you can go to the Dashboards app, low-code apps, and you can find it under queries, and there you can create your very own GQI query. You can select the data source, and after you've selected the data source, you can select operators. And that's what we're going to build today. So we are creating our very own operators. So currently there are 7 operators provided by
some options there, aggregate, filter, join,
Indeed. So
I'm detecting kind of like a SQL kind of language.
Yes, indeed. It's all SQL is also a query language. We also have somehow like a bit of a query. You are building a query here within the user interface.
Okay.
So that's also a beautiful thing about GQI is it's really conversational. Like I don't need to remember all the options. I just select something and GQI provides me with the options.
It's UI based. You've got drop down boxes and they dynamically filter what you can.
And it's so imagine. I just select the elements, so it says, okay, if you want to do something, if you want to filter the elements, well, these columns are available. So let me, for example, say, I want to filter on the name. It knows that the name is a string column, so it provides the option to, for example, apply a contains or a regular expression based on the type you have selected of your column.
Okay.
So if I would, for example, say, I don't want to visualize a string, or I don't want to filter on a string, I would like to filter, for example, on hosting agent ID, which is a number. I get options as equals, greater than, lower than, because that makes sense on numbers to provide these options as well. So that's why what it makes GQI really conversational. You select something, GQI provides you with options. You select something else, you get other options.
But just to be clear, so the GQI starts from there, so the new query.
Yeah.
But does it use any other, because when you're making a dashboard and low-code app, you've got a whole bunch of options there to select parameters and other things. Is that actually related to that, or can we consider this like a different module, or how should I say, like if you select parameters there, can you then apply GQI queries on that, or should you do it all within the query?
It's all, you all do it within this query interface. So you select your data source, can be anything, can be elements, can be parameters. For example, you can fetch a parameter table by ID, fill in the DataMiner ID, fill in the element ID, and you get full table related to that.
Within, so your query even selection of the data that begins your query is done within the GQI query, new query, and not done with, for example, one of the other options there to set the protocol or parameter. Okay, good to know. I just noticed it, so I wanted to make sure. Okay.
Good question. So
should we start with the one step-by-step tutorial? How do we begin? What do you have for us?
So we are going to create a custom operator today. So imagine I will maybe show you a bit of context. I have a data source here. it's just a dummy data source. If you want to have that same dummy data source, it's also in the catalog. Maybe I can show you quickly where you can find that.
Okay, so everyone can then go to the catalog.dataminer.services.
Yeah.
We'll search for
projects dummy.
projects dummy.
Note, you're not
GQI DS.
required to use that one. It's just for this demo I will use it. It's very simple,
Okay.
and you can use it if you want.
Okay, so for the people following along, feel free to deploy that one.
And
You will need a cloud-connected agent
and
for doing this.
if you have deployed that to your DataMiner system, you will have that projects dummy data source in here. So under ad hoc data, you can find projects dummy, and if you would fetch it, it's really very dummy. It's just for projects.
Just a little bit of
Yeah.
projects, customer, okay, and some start and end dates,
Yes.
delivery dates.
And it's start
Great.
date, delivery dates. So what are we going to build today? Is we are going to build a custom operator
Okay,
that calculates the duration of a certain project. So duration is actually delivery date minus start date.
yes, delivery minus start.
So
Okay.
that's what basically is a custom calculation. And that's not really an option. We have some options as operators, but to calculate that duration, we don't have an option. So we can create our very own custom operator
Right.
to do that calculation.
Now, this might be a silly question. Again, I'm approaching this as someone who hasn't worked too
Yeah.
much with this, which is probably good news. But why would I not do that with what you showed me previously, which was the ad hoc data source? Could I not do it in there and then just add a new column with that data?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, indeed, you could do it like that.
Okay.
But what's the power of an operator is we can build an operator now and reuse it on every other data source. So imagine I
Okay.
have this project which has a start and an end time. So it makes sense to calculate the duration for that. But maybe I want to calculate the duration of a booking or of some alarm data.
Completely different input data, but you just select
That operator.
two date times probably,
Yeah.
and
So we have to select two datetime columns, and then based on the selection of the user, we can do that calculation. So it's really transferable to any other data source. That's what makes it very powerful to have these own custom.
so that means also, maybe assuming here, but if our users or the DevOps community creates operators that end up being extremely useful,
Yeah.
they could actually pass that along, and we can add it to the official list that you get.
Yeah. Maybe, yeah. And
Maybe that's an option.
that's an option, but and maybe even on the catalog later on. Currently not yet possible, but that's maybe something
Hey,
that
man,
would be very
The
powerful.
future is bright.
Yeah.
I love this kind of thing. This is the power of DevOps community working
Indeed.
together.
Yeah.
So we're going to create a custom one.
Indeed. So we are going to create a custom one, but the same as in the previous session, we have a quick start with an automation script we
Yes.
configured a bit beforehand. So everyone that wants to follow can just download that from the catalog, and it's called duration. If you would search for duration, you will find this one. And
It's literally, yeah.
okay, just deploy, click your DataMiner system, and you're good to go. Then if everything went fine, you will find that automation script and the automation module in your DataMiner system. So normally then you have something like duration GQI operator.
So an operator is again based on the automation script, currently based on the automation script engine and all of
Yeah, so an operator is also, once again, a piece of C# code, basically. And we leverage the automation module provided by DataMiner to compile that piece of C# codes into a library. So very important to mention is that always make sure that this option is enabled, because this code needs to be compiled as a library,
Yes.
and then GQI can use it, basically.
Similar to ad hoc data sources.
And
again.
it's a similar process, basically.
Great.
So let's now open that script in Visual Studio, and so we can start building our own custom operator.
All right.
So I'll just open Visual Studio, I will continue with our codes, and then once again we will use the DataMiner Integration Studio to DIS to import that automation script, and we can start configuring our custom operator. So DIS, DMA, I will connect my DMA, so that should not take too long. It is just connecting to my DataMiner agents.
So that we can import it and start coding from within Visual Studio.
Yes, and it
As an editor.
And in the meantime, it's connected successfully. So DMA, I will import the automation scripts, and you will find the duration GQI operator in there. So
Yes.
let's select that. Let's click import, and this will import our scripts. Just click this C# icon to save it, and then we will find the C# code of this automation script.
Excellent.
All right, just like this. So you can see there is a little bit of boilerplate provided to get everyone starting.
Mm-hmm.
But
Not a lot.
no, indeed, we will write the rest of it ourselves. So
Great.
first of all, we still have some red lines.
Here
So
we go again with
let's
this
fix that.
squiggly lines.
the squiggly lines indeed.
So I'm guessing again, probably usually it's the NuGet packages that we want to
Yeah. And
upgrade the libraries.
yes, indeed, we will need to make sure that we have the right version of our analytic types or not NuGet package
Yeah,
to have
the
the right.
development pack for automation.
Indeed.
Do we have a minimum? Do you know? the minimum?
I don't know this one by heart. No, I can't say. I should have looked. I will have to look it up for
That's
that.
fine. We'll pick the last one.
And it's last the stable one. There's also make sure that we have all latest features because custom operators, ad hoc data sources is quite some
New tech.
active track as
Active,
well. We're
okay.
quite adding new features to that as well. So
Yep. Perfect.
it's very interesting to have the latest version always. Okay. So in the meantime, this should indeed fix all red lines,
Mm-hmm.
as you can see. But we currently just have a class. So it's a duration operator. It's just a class, but of course we need to have like some way of a contract between GQI and the custom operator in order that GQI knows what he can expect from that custom operator, right? So that's why we introduced
An interface.
an
Again.
interface again to add functionality to your operators. Okay, maybe quickly say what is the goal of this operator. First of all, what do we want is we want a new option in this list that says duration.
Yeah.
And then when the
2
user
days.
selects that, indeed, the user needs to select 2 columns. So it needs to select the column that indicates the start time
And an end time.
and the end time. So that's 2 options, input arguments we call it.
Yes.
It's 2 input arguments required from the user. Once he has selected that, what do the custom operator do is it needs to create a new column called duration. And then finally, it needs to subtract the values from the end column minus the values from the start column to calculate the duration.
Mhm.
And it has to store that in the newly created column. So
Yes. I was gonna ask. So this gets displayed with a new column that gets
Yeah.
added at the end, probably.
yes, indeed. So that's the concept. And
Okay.
that's why we need to have 3 building blocks. And every building block is an interface. So each interface we provide gives functionality to your operator.
Okay.
Okay, so that's a bit the concept of interfaces, building blocks, and or the custom operators, the same as with ad hoc data sources.
Yes.
If you take a look at the documentation, maybe I can quickly show you that. It's at docs.dataminer.services. We have
Mm-hmm.
quite some extensive documentation about these custom operators. And there we also find all different building blocks that we have, all different interfaces that you can add to your class, basically.
Right.
Right, so for this exercise, we will need 3 of them. So let's start with the IGQI input arguments because we need to request 2 columns from the user. So with this IGQI input arguments, we can ask for input from the user. So
Okay.
that's why we need to implement this one. But of course, an interface comes with some methods that we need to implement. So once we have added that to the class,
Generate them through Visual Studio.
we need to implement the interface indeed. So if you've done that, you will see 2 methods are added to our class.
Mm-hmm.
The get input arguments and the on arguments processed.
Yes.
So get input arguments is mainly responsible of saying our implementation to GQI. These are the input arguments that we need to ask the user to.
Things like
then-
the metadata about them, the name probably of the input arguments. Or...
Yeah, and in this case is it the start. What is the start column? What is the end column?
Right.
This is in this case what we need to request the user to fill in.
Okay.
So we will need to return an array of input GQI arguments,
Mm-hmm.
and normally you will already find them in this class. So we have 2 arguments, a GQI drop-down arguments, meaning the start column, and one for the end column. So
Okay.
we basically just need to return these 2 arguments as a new array. So let's go for GQI arguments, and let's just return these 2 arguments. Like this indeed. So then you can throw away this exception.
Okay, so these were pre-prepared from the initial
Indeed.
script that you downloaded.
Indeed, if you would take a look at what they actually are, so these are initialized in the constructor,
Yes.
and they are just arguments having a name, so the start.
And then
and-
mentioning required or optional. Okay.
Yeah, and you can also specify types, which means that if you provide the user with selecting columns,
Mhm.
you can say what type of columns can the user select, because we are creating an operator for calculating duration.
So you'd like daytime.
We want daytimes because indeed for strings it doesn't really matter to calculate the duration. So
Yeah.
that's why we want to filter out all the column options with the datetime value, datetime type basically.
Perfect. Okay.
So that's it for the input arguments. Of course, when the user has selected the input arguments, we need to process it. We want to know what has the user selected.
The value.
We want to have the value indeed. And that's something we can achieve with this onArguments processed method. If we click args, that's the input argument of this method. We have methods such as getArgumentValue. And with that argument value, we are able to get the argument value for a certain argument. So for example, for the start column argument, we can get the start column. So let's save that into a variable in this class, and a property, I should say, and do the same for the end column. So we will just, maybe here already.
Right, so that is the code that will grab the actual selected values from the user and we're storing them in
Yes,
private variables or in variables here to be used
indeed. Yes,
in a later method that will probably do the minus operation,
perfect. That's exactly what we're going to do.
which is probably another interface
Yes, indeed.
to indicate this is something we want to do, an operation.
Yeah, indeed. So that's basically it. I just returned the default because this method requires an onArguments processed output args
Yes.
object. In our case, it doesn't really matter. We just return a default. This will probably call the default constructor with class type.
Okay.
So that's about it for the input argument. So we have requested arguments, we have processed them. So now let's do the second thing. So we have our arguments, but now we still need to create a new column because we need to store that duration value in a column.
Yes.
So let's add an interface for that, and it will be the IGQI column operator interface.
Right, because you want an output of your operators and you need to put it somewhere, so you're going to select a column.
Yes.
Are there other options to put it somewhere, or is the column one pretty much
Well, the column one is probably the most desired one.
standard?
Yes,
Mhm.
because we want to calculate something and we want to store it in a new column. We also don't want to overwrite an existing column. We really want to just store it in a new
Right.
column so it can be displayed correctly.
Right, so we're adding that interface,
Yes.
and then we'll probably need to implement a new method or two.
Indeed, it's just one method.
Okay.
Indeed, so if you implement the interface, we have a handle columns method, and that handle columns method just has a header as input argument. And as you can see, if you would go for the header has several methods available. It has a delete columns, it had a rename column, add columns, so you can basically manipulate the header of your data by
Okay.
adding, deleting, or renaming columns. In this
Okay.
case, we will just add a new column, so we can use the add columns method. And just like this, of course, that method requires a column, and we can just fill in the duration column, which has been created already up front. If you go to the constructor, you will see duration column as a new GQI time
Just the
spent
name,
on- Yes, and just the
duration.
name. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's about it for the first part. So we have request inputs, we have added a column. So
Now we
normally,
need the operator.
indeed, so now we still need to apply that minus calculation,
Yes.
but maybe we can already check how it works. So I will already publish it.
Well, we'll get an empty column now, I assume, right?
Indeed, so we can already check if it works like that.
Okay.
But indeed, the data will still be
So you
Not-
just did a DIS publish.
Indeed.
Should arrive on the agent.
indeed.
And do you require a refresh of your dashboard to be able to
Um,
see newly?
Well, not really. It's not really required to refresh your dashboard totally. You can also just make sure that the new option is fetched for GQI.
Okay.
Just refreshing, make sure that it is the case.
Okay.
But
just-
indeed, just making sure that the nodes, this option is refetching is enough. So you will already see that we have an apply custom operator option in there.
Okay.
And normally you will see, indeed, by default it already selects the first one. We only have one.
Okay.
So you see duration in there. You have two options, a start and an end. So let's select these columns and you will see a new column is added, duration, but it is still empty. So let's now add the actual data to that column.
Okay.
And guess what? We still need one more interface for that.
Yeah.
So that's the last one. It's the IGQI row operator, because now we are going to do something with the values in a row. So we need to add the IGQI row operator interface.
All right.
So let me do that. And then, of course, we still need to implement that one method which it provides.
Which will then allow us to do the operation using those fields of the start and end date.
Yes, indeed. So let's do that. I have the handle row method now, and a handle row method retrieves a row as input arguments. So on that row, we can do a get value. The get value, of course, from what row do we want to get the value? Well, we have stored that into our class. So row get value from the start column. So let's say start equals this, but we probably still need to define the actual type. So it's a date time, which is available in that column. So let's do it like this. And then let's do exactly the same thing for the end. So end equals, and exactly as Visual Studio suggests. So now we have retrieved the start and the end from a row based on these columns. The only thing is we need to calculate the duration, so that's quite simple.
Just a minus should work for date times, I think.
Yes, indeed. So it's just end minus start, and this will automatically be a time span. And of course, we still need to store this value in that new column. So we can once again do that by doing row dot set value this time. So we set the value.
Probably need to select the column that we added.
So the first argument is our column, and then the value itself. So we set the value for the duration column. And what should the value be? Well, it should be duration. And it's actually as simple as this. So we are just retrieving two values, doing the calculation, setting the value in the row.
Right.
So
when you do that, it's a time span. Is the GQI UI then powerful enough to display that as minutes, seconds, hours, or do you still need to do something here to get the units? Or
well, right now this is just GQI will just use the default behavior of a toString, I believe, for a time span.
So it creates it as a string, not as a time span.
The raw value will be time span, but what's displayed in the UI will just be the toString variant. So if you really want to have these minutes and seconds and so on,
you could do that in a constructor then.
Yes.
Here.
If you would like to provide the display value, you can just do it like this. So you can provide whatever representation.
So for now, we're going just with the default toString.
Yes,
that happens in
indeed.
the background. Good. Okay. Interesting.
So let's just save that. And
that should be it there, I guess.
Indeed. Yeah.
Publish, and
let's see if it works. Indeed.
Always love this moment. I always love it.
So I've published it, and normally if I just refresh my dashboard, it should pop up in the duration column. And there we go.
So you don't even need to reapply the...
no, indeed, because the actual operator is the same one, but it's
linked
just
to that,
refreshing the version of that operator, basically.
Perfect.
So as you can see, we have a start and a delivery dates, and here it calculates the duration of start minus delivery.
So yeah, and if you wanted to add something like this, like a unit to that, you would do it like we said in the constructor. You would change the definition of the column. Great. That's very cool to see. I'm guessing that was the exercise, or was there anything else you wanted to?
No, that's the exercise, but maybe one thing I want to show is because we have created our custom operator, and it's reusable.
Okay, yes.
So if I, for example, would say I want to fetch alarms, which have also a start and an end time.
They do, yes.
I can also apply this custom operator on there. So that's the power of these custom operators. They are reusable building blocks. You can reuse them on any type of database.
Other data sources. Yeah.
Indeed. So yeah, I think that's about it.
That's pretty awesome. So anyone who was following along, I'd say go ahead and take a screenshot of this page, I suppose, if you followed to this point. Feel free to have a look in the description of the video and send that in either through upload on Dojo probably, or an email to Tundra Skyline. And again, if you have use cases within your digital environment, within your DataMiner, where you're using such custom operators, feel free to send that in as well. Always happy to hear about how our users are using things.
Indeed, exactly.
Okay, well, thank you very much once again for making some time to show us this amazing feature. And yeah, to everyone watching, I'll catch you on the next one. Goodbye.
Bye.